As I think about, really as I was spending time with the Lord, just thinking about identity, and oftentimes when I am throwing, I really think about how I decide what this is going to be. The clay doesn't determine what it's going to be. I have a plan and a purpose for it, and I make a lot of different things. And I think that's one of the things that the Lord showed me when I was doing this, is that the number of different things that I enjoy making, that I find joy in the variety of things that I'm going to make. And if I had to make the same thing all the time, that I wouldn't enjoy the process as much. And so I think that he's just speaking that he likes variety in all of us, and so that we're all created differently, and we all have a purpose and a plan that is different for other people. And when people come into the studio to learn to throw, one of the things that I tell them is that it's really important that you don't compare your work with someone else's, and that you don't expect everything to go exactly perfectly as you're creating. There's a process to creating, and the first thing you have to do is center, and it's something you have to work at doing. And then when you get centered, then you're able to open that clay up and actually create something. And even if you start and you think that it maybe looks like a cylinder, you can also, eventually you can turn that cylinder into a bowl. Or if you create a cylinder and you think that maybe it doesn't look exciting, it just looks like a small cup, at the end of that process, once the clay has gotten to the point where you can work with it a little bit more, you can cut pieces out of that clay, and then it becomes a luminary, which it becomes a lot more interesting at that point. And I think that's just a good example of how you don't ever know maybe where you're going to end up or what the Lord's plan is for your life completely, but being able to trust the process, and more importantly, just not compare yourself where you are or what the Lord's doing in your life with other people. I have a purpose for this clay as I'm throwing it to create something with it. The condition of the clay makes a difference. If this were the clay that I was trying to throw with, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it because it's very dry and brittle. But if I add water to it, it softens back up. I'm able to wedge it, and then I can get it to the point on the wheel where I can center and throw a pot out of it. When I'm throwing a pot, even if I think in the beginning that it's going to be a certain thing, sometimes things don't work out, and I may have to trim off the top of it, or I may be thinking that I'm going to go one direction, or that the shape is going to look a certain way, but as I start working with it, something else comes out, and I just continue to stay tuned in to what I'm doing, and I allow that pot to take shape. And I think that's another thing that it reminds me of with the Father, that he is so attentive to every detail in our lives and the things that we're doing. And even if for us, like if we were the clay, as that clay is going, it's just spinning around and around, and it's the Father's hands and his attention to detail that is shaping us and changing us. And often the pressure that that shapes the outside is coming from the inside. And so things have to be changed inside of us before they're seen on the outside. And you see that in pieces as you're making them. So sometimes when I'm making a piece, I get it to the point where I think that it is where I want it and I'm really happy with it, but then something may happen and it mars either the side of it or the rim, and I have been able to alter it to a place where I really have ended up really liking those pieces probably more than I would have if I would have stayed with that same plan, and it would have turned out without any of those marks, because it adds what I see in those pieces when I'm done with them. It just adds like movement and life, and they're very interesting and beautiful. They turn out probably more creative and artistic in the end than they would have been if it was just like perfect sides. The clay doesn't do anything. It responds, honestly. I guess that is the thing that clay does, is that it responds to the pressure that I'm putting on it, the amount of water that I have, but it can't shape itself. So if the clay if I don't ever touch the clay, it doesn't become anything. And so I think it's important to connect that to what the Father's doing as the potter, that it is Him that is doing the work in us, and He is the one creating us into what He has destined us to be, that He's created us on purpose, and He has a plan for our lives, and we're all unique in that. But it isn't our responsibility to create our own lives or develop the things in ourselves apart and separate from Him, but it's in partnership with and just really submitting. That's probably the thing that the clay does, is submits to the potter's hands and allows the potter to create the shape and the design that the potter intends for it to be.